your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
Here comes the jam. Getting down with the truth. The only way he knows how to. Girls all up with his name. We call him the chief. You're damn right. He's gonna get that sucker. Yo, we track down the truth. You know what a track down the truth. You know what do they call him? We call him the chief. You're damn right we do.
I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield. You can find us on Rumble. You can find us on YouTube. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button and make sure you like the show. If you're on Rumble, that one you have to follow us on Rumble. But you can like the show. Of course, you can comment on both platforms. And you can find us on Pop Culture Minefield's Facebook page and their Twitter feed as well. There's no reason why you can't watch the show. Now, today's show we're gonna do Walking Tall, and kind of an honor to Joe Don Baker, who passed away recently. He starred in the show. I liked him as an actor. We got a couple of cops that are going to come on here pretty soon here, but before I introduce the movie itself and bring on my guests, I do want to talk about the Los Angeles mission. And I do this plug every single time. And, you know, it's interesting what's going on politically in LA. We're beginning to see a movement away from what I think were the failed strategies of the governor and the local politicians when it comes to homelessness. And, you know, they looked at treatment only without any real coercion to get people in treatment. And I can tell you from experience that some of them just need a little push. And that push sometimes comes by law enforcement and the criminal justice system. And we're seeing a little more movement towards that. I mean, we saw the governor saying, I demand all these cities do something about these encampments, meaning enforce the laws. And in the past, you know, that was all considered evil. Now it's going to be tolerated because, hey, he's a presidential candidate. But at the Los Angeles mission, they have a faith-based element. You go to losangelesmission.org, and they use cognitive behavioral therapy programs. They use strategies which are the leading ones in the industry. And I can't say that is the case for all of the government-funded programs, right? But the Los Angeles mission does, and they have to use every dollar that they get efficiently because they don't get any government money. Because they do the sign of the cross there, they don't get any government money. So I want you to do me a favor. Look up the losangelesmission.org. Make a donation today. Help some folks down there in Skid Row in Los Angeles, the largest collection of homeless people in the country, and help get them off the street. And, you know, if you're listening to me somewhere other than LA, we've probably got somebody from your state on our streets in Los Angeles. So, you know, don't think you're just helping Californians. So we got them from all over the place. They come here because we foolishly give away all the benefits, government benefits to them. And of course, that's a big magnet, that and the weather, a big magnet to come to LA. So make a donation today, help out your fellow citizen. So, hey, today I wanted to talk about my other show too. My other show, Briefing with the Chief. I just did a show, and I think it's important. I've been doing a series of shows where we talk about what's going on with the protests. And I just remind people of Trump, anti-Trump, the first time around, where gradually the demonstrations turned into riots and assaults on people, including assaults on law enforcement. And you're beginning to see that. Recently, they had a demonstration up in Seattle where Antifa came out wearing masks, having helmets on, wearing all black, and attacked some Christians who were protesting against some of the policies up there. And Seattle police took them to jail, surprisingly. They didn't do that stuff in the past. But they assaulted the police. They assaulted Christians. And I'm making sure that when these things happen, I call it out, because I know as Trump's latest administration progresses, we're going to see anti-Trump 2.0, where the violence will ramp up. And of course, they'll blame Trump and they'll blame his followers. And I don't care where you're at politically. You can protest, but you can't assault people. And if you assault people, you need to go to jail. That's why I'm happy to see the Congresswoman going to jail for assaulting the ICE folks. I'm happy that that in Columbia, New York, arrested a bunch of those protesters who took over the library. They did the same thing in UCLA. Now they did it up in Seattle. But you're going to see assaults on police, and you're going to see assaults on protesters who are supporting Trump or some of the policies of Trump by this left, and it just can't be tolerated. And if you are in a city where your politicians support it, you need to call those guys out too, because it doesn't matter where you are politically. Political violence is unacceptable. That's why we see the murder. We saw the murder of the two Jewish folks in D.C. That guy had been protesting since, God, for the last 10 years. First he protested with the Answer Coalition, a leftist organization that claims to be anti-war, but they seem to be only those wars they don't like. If people are using violence against people they don't like, they seem to be okay with that. And other leftist organizations, and he killed two Jewish people in DC recently. So the violence is ramping up. Doxing against conservatives, swatting conservatives, firebombing Tesla dealerships, and I'm kind of tracking that on my show, Briefing with the Chief. And I suggest you guys watch me every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on KJ's Rumble channel and their Facebook page, and you catch me in the audio version of the show, and you'll see it scrolling on the bottom there, kjrdb.com, Briefing with the Chief. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is I have a show coming up where we're going to talk about with the judge in Minnesota and her crime when she hid the illegal immigrant from the ICE agents. I read the indictment for that case on the air. It's shocking how far she went. It just betrays this arrogance of the law by a sitting judge. It's crazy. Classic interference, classic obstruction, and all of the witnesses against her are credible witnesses. They're cops, they're federal agents, they're lawyers, officers of the court. She's toast. She is toast, and she needs to go to prison to send a message. So a lot of these great subjects I'm doing on Briefing with the Chief. I suggest you join me, and particularly if you're a cop, you want to hear a voice that actually is supporting you. Please watch Briefing with the Chief, and we'll see you every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, let's get to our show here. Let's bring on our guest, and then I'll introduce the movie, and we'll talk a little bit about the background of the movie because it's based upon a true story. It's Walking Tall. It was released in 1973. It's American neo-noir biographical vigilante action film about the life of sheriff in McNairy County, Beaufort, Buster. So let's bring on our guest. We'll start with Cliff Yates. He's a former deputy sheriff upstate New York and former deputy on the LA County Sheriff's Department. Worked for a small agency, so hopefully we'll get some input on how these small county sheriffs work. Hey, Cliff, how you doing?
Good to see you, man. Glad to be on the show. Thanks for having me. And this was a great movie to see again.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, this is, of all of them, even the remakes, I like this one. I still like this one the best. Even like they did some sequels and then they did the remake, but this is the best one because it's true to life and it's very entertaining, right? I mean, they did just take some license with the story, and I like Joe Don Baker, who recently passed away. So let's bring on our next guest, Danny Regalado, retired detective from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and he is living in the volunteer state.
Yes, I am.
I don't know if he went down there to see Buford Pusser's memorial, but maybe he will after the show. Hey, Danny, how you doing?
Just fine, thank you.
So hey, it's a little bit the Walking Tall. When did you first see it, Cliff? And I mean, did you see it I saw it in the 70s. I remember being probably a preteen or something like that, and was enamored with the whole thing.
I saw it in 1973. I was in the 10th grade. My dad was chief of police at the time, a small village police department with 3 officers at its height volume. And, every time I see this movie, it's when you have me research these movies, I always learn something new that I never did see. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I thought was amazing was that, in 1974, he was actually supposed to play himself in the sequel, and then he was killed in a car crash before he could do that.
Yeah, it is crazy. It would have been interesting to see how could act.
Yeah, I
Did
know.
a lot of other stuff, but Danny, when did you first see it? And what did you think when you first saw this movie?
You know what? I was a mere little lad. I think I was 13 years old when this came out, but we used to go over to, probably saw this at the Los Cerritos Mall. I remember they had a United Artists Theater there, and I probably snuck in because I didn't realize that it was rated R until I went back and researched it the other day and watched it again. But you know, that was a great time for movies. That 70s. You had Billy Jack was coming out.
Yeah,
just come
that's
out.
right.
Yeah, the whole vigilante genre. Who was the guy?
Oh yes, because he was
a New York guy, and he played he was played Airwolf. He played in the movie Airwolf. He played in a movie where it's kind of a vigilante kind of thing.
You talking Charles Bronson?
No, he played Airwolf, and
oh yeah, because Bronson was in one of those movies too, Mr. Kiersey. Yeah,
Mr. Kiersey.
All the Death Wish movies.
Death Wish, that's it. Yeah, I love those movies, man.
I'll think of it. Maybe Martine can do the who starred in Airwolf. Who was the main guy?
Airwolf was
because he did
wasn't that
Jan Michael Vincent?
Jan Michael Vincent, yeah.
I remember he did a movie that was kind of a vigilante kind of thing as well. And
there's a lot of them because that's when Dirty Harry started coming out.
Yeah, kind of the anti-hero, right, kind of thing too. Where they're using violence to overcome violence, right? They're what do they call it? Extrajudicial methods they're using. That's what they're doing. At least if they're working in law enforcement. But there was a lot of them where they weren't really connected to law enforcement or doing this vigilante stuff. But I want to do. There's something like I was on a show Saturday. They did this already on Pop Culture Minefield, but from a different perspective. And there is some history to the Dixie Mafia, so we ought to get in that a little bit before we jump in the movie. And you know, this was such an interesting subject, and I love history, right? So the Dixie Mafia, their biggest base was actually not in McNairy County, and it was actually in Phoenix, Alabama. And Phoenix, Alabama is located it's in Alabama across from the Choctaw River, and I'm never get all these Indian names right, from Columbia, Georgia, and earned the notorious title of the wickedest city in America in the mid 20th century. So it was like the 40s and 50s, they were considered the wickedest city in America. And you can hear them referenced in the movie. I got some friends down in Alabama. Well, this is the connection because they were all interrelated. And the organized crime flourished in Phoenix City. And this, just for your yucks, if you guys, it's Phoenix's Phenix City, so it's not the Phoenix like in Arizona, with activities like gambling, prostitution, bootlegging. The bootlegging was rampant, and corruption by political officials, and there was the murder of a reformer, Albert Patterson, that caused the state and the feds to crack down. They actually brought in the military to take these guys on. That's how powerful they were back then. But the state line is an affiliated group with these guys. So they had a couple of different state lines, and one of them was on McNairy County. So during the 1950s and 60s, so as they were breaking up Phoenix City, some of these guys fled to this state line, because there's another one. There's another state line that it's borders Alabama and Mississippi, but this one is Elkhorn County, Mississippi, and McNairy County, which is where our hero is from, right? And in Tennessee along Route 45, and it became a hub for various criminal activities. The state line mob operated in this region and was involved in bootlegging, obviously illegal gambling, prostitution. We see this in the movie, robbery, and even murder. And they owned some motels along the border, and which they did all these nefarious activities. And they're commonly referred to as the Dixie Mafia or the Cornbread Mafia, and not necessarily La Cosa Nostra, not the Italians, but they'd work with them. They'd work with anybody, but just a loosely affiliated group of criminals who did just about everything and coordinated together. And you see that in the movie too. So this is all based upon it's interesting criminal history, right? Not the stuff we're used to in LA and New York where it's La Cosa Nostra, but they have their own version of organized crime. So that is the backdrop for the movie. Cliff, anything like this going on in upstate New York when you were working as a cop there? This small town bad guys working together.
Yeah, there was a family. There was a deputy I worked with, Kent Waltman, rest in peace, but he was like a Buford Pusser type. This guy was a tough character, man. And so he went to a big bar fight, and you go in by yourself, just like the movie, just like that, those bars. And out in the middle of nowhere. And he went in there for a big bar fight, and he was a bad dude. And these Cartwrights were in there, and they saw him come through the front door. They grabbed a fishing pole off the wall, and they cast a lure at his head. And then he ended up dragging all these guys out, and he rolled up to the jail, and people came out to help him, and they were stacked 4 deep, a long ways in the back seat. And by the time they got him into the booking center, the glass had blood all over it. And the dad came out to bail the kids out, and he goes, "Where are the deputies that beat you guys?" And they go, "That guy right there. You're telling me one deputy brought you guys in here? You guys are going to sit here and rot in this jail." And he walked out.
Well, that's why they used to have height requirements and weight requirements, because it really truly was one riot, one ranger back in the day, right?
And New York State Police at that time in the 70s, you had to be 6'1" or 2", but that was a height requirement. Yep.
Yeah. I think it was 6 foot for a long time for the sheriff's department. Obviously, that faded away before I got in there, because I'm not quite 6 foot, just shy of that. Danny, in LA, we didn't quite have this kind of stuff, but we had pockets. Remember the gangsters up in Glassell Park? They had like a family that controlled that area up there, and I want to say they were kind of responsible. Now, were they responsible for Deputy Escalante's murder? I can't remember now, but there was a group. So we had pockets of this where they might control a neighborhood, but certainly not a county.
Yeah, I've never seen a county. I know when you got down into HG, there was the families that controlled that area, or if you got up into East Side Paramount. I mean, it controlled cities, but I never seen one actually control a county.
Right, and because just for clarity, folks, the county of Los Angeles has it's 4,000 square miles, and it's got over 10 million residents. Pretty hard to control.
Yeah, to have a reach out like that, you have to be pretty well organized, like it's say a Mexican mafia or a outlaw biker gang, something like that, in order to stretch out through.
Plus, law enforcement can surge a ton of resources. Largest sheriff's department, 10,000 folks, and LAPD, and then federal resources. But that's tough, Cliff. So in a smaller town, that's tough to do it, right? In a small county, right? You can do it, but you'd want to save it for the worst things, right?
No, we were 500 square miles and 20 road deputies. They hired separately for road and custody. And so, a midnight shift in the 70s, sometimes it was just 2 of us. We split the county, right? So 35 miles north and south, and maybe 20, left and right there. And so you're running that midnight shift. And I know in the 70s, when I started in 78, there was still people running stills in the county and running moonshine and whatnot.
Yeah. I think Gambit talked about the Black Panthers, a different kind of, they did some organized crime stuff to support their political stuff. But the guys we're talking about are just stone cold crooks. That's what they are. It's about enrichment and their hedonistic endeavors, I guess.
Yeah, it'd be tough to do that, like you said, in LA County. I could see that happening now, living out here in Tennessee, and that area where Walking Tall took place up north, probably up 3 hours north of me. But these counties get big. I mean, Rutherford County here, we're the 3rd largest county in Tennessee, and it's big. I mean,
well, you mean big in terms of geographic size, right? Is that what you mean? Size?
Yeah, size.
Size. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're spread out, right? And so it's kind of like, so like it's your one riot, one ranger still for some of those areas, right? And we had that when I first joined the sheriff's department. We kind of had that in AV. I think it's little events are out there now with people. so there's more people to back you up. But let's roll our first scene and let's talk about Joe Don Baker. Now, the movie starts Joe Don Baker, and they were originally going to have somebody else do it, but he wasn't available, and they picked him. And yeah, I like him. It doesn't really, like, he's a decent sized guy. He's not as big as Buford Pusser, who was 6'6", 250, huge guy, but he has a similar background. They both played college football, you know, and I think they were they both in the Marines? I can't remember if Joe Don
Yeah,
Baker,
they were.
they were both in the Marines, although Buford Pusser, I believe it was temporary. It wasn't that long because he had asthma or something like that.
Yeah, made it
But
to boot camp, I think.
and here he is. He's rolling up back home. He was a wrestler for a while. I got a pic for him, so we'll show the wrestling pic right afterwards. But I like Joe Don Baker as an actor. This is probably where he was the leading man in it. That his kind of his iconic role, I would say. But he was in a couple of James Bond movies. I think once as a villain and once as an ally. And he was also I remember him. He was also in the remake of Cape Fear. Remember that? So
Yeah, that's right.
He gets killed by Robert De Niro's psycho
Nero,
character.
yeah.
Yep. And but if I have to pick a role that I remember him the most for, it's this one. This was an iconic role, and it put him on the map. I mean, if you read into his history, it put him on the map, and it just a good character, and somebody you can relate with as a character. What do you think, Cliff?
Yeah, I know it's based on a true story, but it really, and I guess why these stories work is because they really do follow that hero's journey, where you got somebody who had, they had some skills from some past life, and now they've gone on their own, kind of away from society. But then something comes along where they are compelled to protect some kind of victims. And so here you have a guy here who he brings those wrestler skills to the story. He's kind of decided to go back to his hometown, a quiet life, and not be in the wrestling. And then he's compelled to step forward and fight crime. So it goes right along with the hero's journey. And even though it's based on a true story, it kind of just helps the story even more.
Yeah, his dad had a history in law enforcement too. So
yeah, that's right.
It wasn't that much of a reach for him to come back and jump into it.
That's right.
He kind of sees what's happening with his county, and it's kind of it's kind of a well, we see when we all started law enforcement, crime was off the hook, right? In comparison to what it is today, right? And then we lowered crime. But what was the big thing that helped lower crime? We helped people take control of their neighbors through community-oriented policing. What do you guys want to do? How do you want to do it? We engaged the community, and we worked with them, which is what you see Pusser doing here. I'll work with you, and I'll help make the community safe. And people like that. And then the leftists got in charge, and we jumped off the deep end. It hasn't quite got as bad as it was, but it's and if we don't stop locally, it will get worse. Right, Danny? That's what so it's you have to do what's best for the community. And that's
you're exactly right with that, or in policing. And but I don't know if it's any from the 80s to now, because you flip on the TV and I still get occasional updates like you guys probably do from now, and it just seems like every day there is just something. They vandalized metro trains the other day, vandalized police cars on Washington. But when did that ever happen when we were on? I mean, that just didn't happen.
I look at data, Danny, and of course data is kind of skewed because people aren't reporting. But the murders are like in California in '93 we had 14.1 murders per 100,000. We dropped it down to 4.4 by 2014, and I say we because we were all working during that whole time period, right? And I want to say it's in the sevens now. So it hasn't quite in California. It hasn't now in LA. When it was 4.14 per 100, it was like 25 per 100,000 in LA, and so I'm talking California numbers. So it hasn't quite got as bad. And if you could look at the numbers for robberies, that it hasn't quite got as bad. But the social media amplifies it.
Well, I think they're between like 84, and Cliff could probably agree, 84 to 90. It was just nonstop, 245 multiple gunshot victims, and it wasn't abnormal to roll up to 4 or 5 victims down. Either in East Compton or Paramount. It was just nonstop.
Well, now I think social media amplifies it, right? I think that's why people have the perception that it's worse. And let me clarify this: it doesn't have to be as bad as it is. It's only as bad because these criminal justice reformers have decided it's going to be that bad. Now, the kid in the show is Leif Erikson, the boy.
Leif Garrett.
I didn't know that. Oh, Leif Garrett. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So
now I recognize him. Yeah.
All right, I think that's that clip. Well, no, not yet. Okay, so now you see the dad. He played Rockford's.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So so you see some of these character actors that flow in there, and here he is, young guy, But I did like the fact that they tried to get somebody that had at least a similar background. He played college football, and they're not using someone like Tom Cruise, who's 5'9", who's going to be the tough badass, right? They get somebody who's at least a decent size who's going to portray Pusser. I mean, when I watched, did you ever see? I don't really watch the series. What's the series where the tough guy beats everybody up and he's military intelligence now? And Tom Cruise played him. Oh, I'm forgetting.
Reacher.
Yeah, Reacher. I don't watch it anymore because the main character there is an anti-cop guy.
Exactly. I stopped watching it too.
I stopped watching that idiot because of that. But the first person who played Reacher is Tom Cruise, and when you understand the character, because I think they wrote some books on it. He's 5'9". I mean, come on.
But it's Tom Cruise.
I'm thinking, oh, God, but they had even though I don't like the actor playing the new Reacher, he is legitimately the 6.
Oh, he's lucky if he's 5'7".
Oh, Tom Cruise? Yeah,
but he's small.
Yeah, he's a small dude, and I ran into some tough small dudes, but you're not going to be throwing around 4 or 5 guys when you're that big, and you're not going to be breaking up a bar fight. As Cliff talked about, when you're 5'7", right? You're going to be going out and calling for help. That's what's going to happen. Yeah,
you're going to go out and get your 6'7" partner.
So Leif Garrett was arrested on the transit system. Danny, do you remember that?
Yeah,
he was.
He got hooked up for heroin.
Yeah, he did. He's an addict now. Too bad, but he went into the life of crime, and so the real Buford Pusser was a wrestler. I think I got a picture of him as a wrestler here. You got it there, Martine? I guess there he is. And you can see he's a big guy and a thick guy here. And I looked back. Back in the day, before they had like WWF, they had regional wrestling circuits, and so he was at a regional wrestling circuit as I think Wild Bill or something like that. But so he was truly a wrestler, but he also played ball when he was in school, right? And he played in college. So this is a big, strong dude, and that probably helped him survive all these assassination attempts.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have handled all that stuff, right? I think I'd have gone on the first one. So, but big guy, strong guy. I think I got a picture of him after he was shot. And I think let's throw that one up there, and it sees. We're going to see where he gets shot a couple of different times in this movie, but he gets shot in the jaw. Do you have that one, Martine?
I'm sorry, which one?
The one where he looks older. He got shot in the face. You can see the scar.
Yeah.
There he is. Now, clearly, he's looking older and he's looking busted up. If you remember the wrestling photo, and you can see he's got the scar under his eye there, where they had to rebuild his jaw. And
that was probably after his second attempt there.
And I think I got one more pic of him, Martine. I don't remember which one that was. Let's throw that up there. Oh, okay. These are the bad guys. I think here are the people that they think are responsible. This is, I believe, the lady that tried to kill him, and I can't remember who that guy is.
No, that's Buford and his wife.
Buford and his wife. Okay, that's right.
Yeah,
you couldn't tell, and he looks completely different in there, probably because he's still got swelling. He's got a bandage on his.
I tell you what, though, they got a dead ringer for the female in the movie because she looks exactly like her.
Yeah,
This
I think
person
she's.
here.
I personally, I think she's prettier in the pictures I see of her real life. I think she's actually prettier than the actress.
Did you guys know that they 2024 they exhumed her body to get an angle on the shots?
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
The person that they think is responsible for it is a guy named Kurzenick, and I'll get into that in a little bit. He's got a whole history on him too. But let's roll the next scene. I think it's the lucky spot. So he's back in town. He's visited his family, and one of his childhood friends wants to take him out to party on the town. Never a good idea, particularly a crazy guy like this guy. And he takes him out to basically the state line area where they have these motels and prostitutions and gambling. And of course he realizes they're cheating here, and this is where he and his friend, mostly he, takes on this crowd here. And I don't think he was drinking very much. I just think he was watching, and the fight is on. And these are guys that are used to, well, okay, so I have to explain it. So he had two sets of dice, the shooter, right? So he's obviously playing for the house, and he was going to cheat with a set of dice. And I imagine everybody loses, and he probably gets a cut. The player probably gets a cut from the house. Here's his friend, and the fight's on, and he ends up getting killed. His friend ends up getting killed, so he can't be a witness. Did you hear Elvis gave money to? Yeah, I think Elvis. I want to say he helped pay for his funeral. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but yeah, Elvis is in where's Elvis at? Was he in Tennessee or
Memphis? Yeah, Tennessee.
Memphis? Okay, yeah, so that's why he's the state hero. And he gets in a fight with these guys, and he's I don't want to say he's winning the fight, but they're definitely these guys who are running this place are definitely having an experience that they're not used to. They're not used to one guy tearing them up. And he gets cut up in this thing. They actually carve him up once they do finally get control of him. Did you hear that Elvis gave money to Buford when his car got shut up fighting crime? Yeah, I did hear that he took an interest in Buford and that he helped the family. For whatever reason, I remember that maybe he helped with some of the funeral costs or after Buford was killed too, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So here's what you're talking about, Cliff. This is one guy. He's taking on the whole crowd here.
Yeah.
Essentially one guy. His friend is trying to help out there, I guess.
Yeah.
And he's busting the place up. Now, one of the things, Danny, I don't know if you ever worked West Hollywood. I know Cliff did. So the motels, remember the Beverly Sunset, the Doheny Motel, the Alta Cienega, all of those. I don't want to say shitbird motels, but they're little motels that were along the strip where you had club after club after club. And if you wanted to get a lady, prostitution was going on, dope was going on, all kinds of illicit activity were going on in these places. Now they've all been, I think the Alta Cienega is still there, but the Doheny Sunset, I think it was, and the Beverly Sunset. Yeah, they're gone now, right? I think they redeveloped those out. But we didn't have gambling in those locations, but you definitely had prostitution and dope going on and a whole lot of other degenerate activities going on at those places. Because we used to work them, right? You used to work along Sunset, so you make some arrests. And adjacent to all these where you had the Whiskey Go-Go right across the street from the Doheny. You had Gazzari's down the street, which is now closed. It was the Key Club when I went back. I don't know what it is now. And you had Scandia's. Remember Scandia's?
Yeah.
That was a place where the kind of like old Blue Eyes and that crowd kind of hung out at on the Sunset Strip. And then and I'm talking this is the 80s, right? And then you had it morphed, but you had a lot. You also had what's Johnny Depp's place, the Viper Room.
Viper
Room was up there, and I think one of the Phoenix brothers died outside of that place. He took some drugs in there. He died out on the street of an overdose. Joaquin. It was River Phoenix.
River, yeah.
Yeah, so you had all these clubs, and it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and you had all these shitbird motels, and this was what State Line reminded me of to some degree. Cliff, do you agree?
Yeah.
So
definitely, yeah.
everybody knew what was going on. The motel guys knew what was going on.
Yeah.
Everybody knew what was going on, you know. And I remember I was working a night car, and I got a briefing from Major Crimes, and they said, okay, well, you're the only one out there on night. I was night detective. They said, so we just need you to go in the clubs and look for certain things. And they told me what to look for, because they said organized crime is up there. And so I would just go and check these places out and see what was around. And there was a place that you guys don't know. It was opened up. It was called Fleetwood's. It was on Santa Monica Boulevard. It was Fleetwood's because the name was supposed to be after Mick Fleetwood, right? So it was supposed to be upcoming trending club. Didn't have really any good parking. It was right on Santa Monica Boulevard. I want to say, oh God, I want to say Larrabee, but I'm not sure the cross street. And the neighbors kept claiming they couldn't. They put in a high-end sound system and all this other stuff in anticipation of getting their permit, and they didn't get the permit. Yeah, Dennehy played them in '78, so another remake, similar plot, but they couldn't get their permit, and they were connected. I was told that they were connected, and but couldn't get their permit, and somebody broke in and stole their sound system, and the insurance company paid off like $500,000 for the sound system. So this, and I also got hit up, and they asked me to go check out a place where Gotti Jr., when he was still a young man, a teenager basically, socked up some valet folks up on the Sunset Strip. So, and they asked me to look out for the guy. I never found that guy, but you know, so that those organized crime was in and about the Sunset Strip. And when you have sex, drugs, and rock and roll and prostitution, you're going to have organized crime, right?
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, because that's how they make the money, right, Danny? That's any
That's
places
right.
in LA. Any place in LA.
Everybody was making their money.
Oh,
The
everybody was.
hotel guy,
Yeah, and
happy little world.
And they all turn a little blind eye because the money's rolling in, and to some degree, so do the city fathers. So I was working as the detective lieutenant. I guess I'll tell this story on air. I don't really talk about it very much because it wasn't very fun. So I did a research project on rapes on Santa Monica Boulevard. On Sunset Boulevard, because I was going through that thing that all the lieutenants have to go through, management class, and you're supposed to come up with a problem and then come up with a solution. And you guys have both worked for me before, so I'm a nerd. I'm gonna look into it, and I'm gonna come up with some public policy angle to deal with it. So I go, okay, well, we have a lot of women who are getting raped on the Strip, but we're not making any cases because they were getting drugged and they were getting drunk and picked off the herd, or getting drugged and drunk. Same thing, right? And then they were getting raped. And so I did research, and the problem with it is they couldn't identify the suspect, and just bits and pieces of evidence is what was coming through. And I said, okay, well, then I'm probably not getting, I'm only getting a fraction of the reporting. So what I really need to do is do a public awareness campaign. Danny probably is figuring out where this is going. I do a public awareness campaign to get more reporting. If I get more reporting, I can piece information together and I can solve crimes, right? You're Detective Danny. That's good stuff, right?
Yeah.
More reporting, get pieces of information, link them, find out suspects, then do a DNA test. Boom, I got them, right? That's what I wanted to do. And so I convinced my captain, who's a female and was down for the cause. She wanted to help the ladies. And so we started a public awareness campaign. Oh my God, you'd have thought I, shot the city fathers in the city of West Hollywood. They were pissed because they felt it brought
Bet you love those stats.
undue attention to the city. And why were they upset about that? These are all progressives. You know, let's help women. Let's help. These are all people who claim to be progressives. And why didn't they want me to do that? Because they made $10 million in tax revenues and hotel occupancy tax off of the Sunset Strip, and they didn't want any bad reporting. Oh yeah, it was nasty. They well, you've seen me in meetings pitching how I feel about when I'm making a pitch. I can be very convincing. They wouldn't let me go to any meetings. I can only defend my position via memo, and I did. And every time they tried to attack my position, I was well researched. I shot them down, and it was getting pretty there was a lot of pressure on my boss, and I finally said, "Hey, if you need me to go, I'll go." And sure enough, they transferred me out. Boom. And I thought at that time, "Hey, my career's toast," because I pissed off some folks, and then surprisingly, the people that I worked for in the department surveyed my detectives, and the detectives, "Oh yeah, he's right. That's exactly what's happening." They didn't do anything about it, but it didn't really hold me back at that point. So that's what happens. Money is rolling in, and city fathers turn a blind eye. Maybe they're not getting direct money from these guys, but they might get tax revenue. But in this case, they're probably getting direct money payoffs. And they don't want the sex, drugs, and rock and roll to stop because they're making money off it. Right? Right, Danny?
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't be too naive that the money flow stops at them.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I wouldn't be here's the other thing. Oh, hey, come on, why don't you come to dinner and we'll talk about that permit? And so they get fed, and they get, oh yeah, you can hold your meeting here, and they'll give them a deal. So there was a lot more going on. But what shocked me about it is all these people pretended to be progressive Democrats. And I laid out clear and unequivocally that women were getting raped on the strip, and they didn't care. That bothered me the most. It's like, please don't tell me progressives care about this stuff, because you know what? When it comes to power, they'd rather have the money and the power than deal with victims that they say or care about. I really think
you got to rent out that hotel room.
Yeah, and sell that drink.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is we're talking about. Here's the problem with people between the ages of 18 and 35. They think they're indestructible anyways. If you say, hey, there's problems on the Sunset Strip with drug facilitator, they're still going to go because that's where all the beautiful people are at, right? I knew that. It didn't slow anything down.
Well, I think we all spent. I know I spent my time as
You there, Danny? We lost Danny. He spent his time. So let me tell you, here was the coup de grace for me, Cliff, because since I'm telling the story, is I get a call from the local news. It's Sweeps Week. So all these people are learning this inside baseball. It's Sweeps Week, and the local channel wants to do a story on rapes. And so they reach out, and they figured out by themselves, having nothing to do with me, that West Hollywood was one of the places that there were a lot of rapes. We got to tell Danny to try reconnect. Oh God, I can't spell fast enough. Connect, Danny.
I think he's reconnected. I see.
There we
He's
go.
moving. There you go.
Yeah,
So
I'm
telling the coup de grace for me over there at West Hollywood was one of the local news stations was doing their own research and figured out West Hollywood was a rape hotspot. And so they called me up as the detective lieutenant and asked if I would do an interview. And by this time, it still hadn't blown up yet, right? And I talked to my boss, and she said, yeah, just don't mention that you're working West Hollywood. Just go on as an expert. So I do that. I don't mention the city at all. I just talk about drug facilitated rape, yada, yada, whatever, how to protect yourself, that kind of thing. And man, I tell you, that's when the city lost it. They absolutely freaking lost it. And it said I was out of control, even though I'd got my permission from my boss. And I knew my days were numbered. I was God, I'm telling the story. I was deeply involved in a very high profile gay bashing situation that occurred on Santa Monica. Well, at the same time we had that, this just tells you just how low these guys can go, these politicians. And it was all over the news. It was on, what's that guy Walsh who had that where he called in. It's national news, and they did it multiple times.
America's Most Wanted?
Yeah, America's Most Wanted, absolutely. And we're getting inundated with all these stupid false tips. And we're pressed, right? And I'm fighting to keep my detectives on the case because saying, well, we need manpower. I'm like, no, they need to investigate. Well, at the same time, we had a lady who was kidnapped from a local grocery store, taken back to her condo, and raped for 2 days. And these guys did not once did they ask about that goddamn case, not once. And so every time I was asked to give a briefing on the gay bashing case, and we caught those guys and put them in prison. And I always gave an update on the rape just to drive them crazy because they didn't want to hear about that. I said, well, you need to know about this rape too, because it's vicious rape. We actually caught everybody involved. I had a really good crew of detectives. They were great guys. But yeah, that's how shallow that's money. That's what it's all about. Okay, I'm venting here. Let's roll our next scene. I always thought you walk tall. So here he's been beat up, he's been cut up, and he's reported it to the sheriff. And this is the guy he ends up running against. And this is where the title, I think, comes from. Is this attitude? He's basically saying, hey, we can't do this, we can't do that. Nobody will talk. The one guy that will talk, they won't believe him because they say he's a goofball. And this is where Buford realizes, remember, his dad was a cop, that this sheriff is corrupt and he's covering for these guys. And I obviously I didn't think the politicians in my case were necessarily corrupt, but they didn't want to deal with the issue. And this guy doesn't want to deal with the issue. So he marginalized it, which is exactly what was happening in the situation I was involved in. Marginalizes the case, not a big deal, just ignore it. And he says, I always thought you walked tall, right?
Right.
I thought you were your own man, but you're for sale. That's what he's saying, right, Cliff?
Yep, that's what he's saying. Yeah, he had a different view of him growing up, and now he's been shattered, his image.
Yep, right, exactly. And lots of times in these small towns, it is image, right, Danny?
Yeah, it's the image, perception, right? Yeah, don't meet your heroes.
Yeah. Well, it's and it's you want people to think positively. Now, this is a guy he's Joe Don Baker here. He's not ever going to trust this sheriff and the sheriff's office again after this, right, Danny?
Yeah, no, he's not. It's like you said, he's always known him as he was a kid, and he always thought he walked tall, and you finally realize, when it came face to face, he didn't. And now Buford's got to sit back, get well, and figure out what he's going to do, which is run for sheriff.
Yeah, and not right away though. So ultimately,
No.
he has to
Yeah.
go through he gets his revenge, and then we'll do the payback scene in a little bit, and he gets prosecuted. And I think the court case is the funniest case when those guys all come in, and we'll see that in a little bit. I think. But here's the good cop who has to knuckle under, right? I mean, you work for a small agency, Cliff. I mean, you could, if the boss will tell you what you're going to work on, even if you want to work on something else, right?
Yeah. Oh, man, that's the way it is. True. Yeah, absolutely.
I think when you're with a bigger agency, you can find places to work where you don't have to, you can either transfer away from those guys, or there's enough allies on your shift that you can focus on other stuff. Because I remember some of the things I said, you know what, I need you guys to do what I want you to do. But if there's something you like to do some of the stuff I need to do, but do the other stuff a lot. Like if I had a guy that wrote tickets, I'd say, if you love writing tickets, please write a lot of them.
So I used to get called in. I get called in by the sheriff personally. Yates, in my office. Can you imagine? I have this overtime slip for daylight savings time. Do I ask for the other hour back at the other end? You want to rip this up now? Oh, yes, sir. I want to rip it up. I'll never forget that day.
Well, I never discourage guys that if they liked a particular area, a lane, yeah, go ahead and work in that lane. But I still need you to do this, and I still need you to do this. So do some of the things I need you to do. And because actually, I love the guys who wrote traffic tickets, because because not everybody likes to do that. So I always encourage them to write a ton of them. Go and write a ton of those traffic tickets, and because then you take the heat off of everybody else, if that's what you like to do. So, but you'd have watch commanders. You had to see the world the way they saw the world.
Yeah.
You have to be only a felony cop. You have to only be this. And I'm like, please, dude, we need everybody, and everybody on this team. Let the guy who likes writing tickets write tickets. Let him have the accidents if he likes doing the accidents. Don't denigrate him just because he's a traffic guy, or he just wants to pick off warrants. I mean, just as long as they're productive, right? Unless you got
That's right.
a problem, like you maybe got robberies going on, you need some guys to focus a little bit, But hey, let's roll. I want to do one more scene before we got our 2-minute break here, and this is the payback. So this is the payback scene where he's now healed. He's got his was it hickory? He's got his hickory stick, his big
Yeah.
club.
OG Hickory. Yeah.
It's a big stick.
And walking tall with a big stick, and I got to do this. One of my favorite, maybe he's my favorite president because I read his biography, is Teddy Roosevelt. Walk tall,
Yeah. Carry a big
or walk
stick.
softly and carry a big stick, right? Walk softly,
Yeah.
and carry a big stick. So maybe Teddy was a little bit of a hero, this guy, because he'd come in with a big stick and he takes him out with his big stick, and of course he destroys the place. And it's interesting, as he's doing this with these guys, he goes and he says, I want you to pay me for all my damages. And he gives him a bill.
Sign it. Sign it.
Sign the receipt.
Sign it. You gave me too much here.
Yeah. And you gave me too much. I don't need that. I just need this. Sign the receipt. But he tears the place up with his. And the interesting thing is, you hear in the movie, there are times when people take enforcement action where they're bigger than life, and that actually protected him. It was the fact that he was using this big stick to take on everybody who were mobsters. They're clearly they got somebody from the state comes down, or an asphalt comes down. Everybody's making money off this because they're not just paying off local; they're paying off the county and federal state guys. But the big stick has captured the imagination of the news. Right?
Yeah.
They love it. Danny, we did the anti-graffiti stuff. Do you remember that? I one of the things that stunned me about all that is when we started doing sweeps and we were doing press conferences, is how many politicians came out of the woodwork for that stuff for press conferences. They loved it. Now they hate it.
They loved it because it was a
quality of life issue. Yeah.
It was an easy given, and you know what? But it made, I hate to say it, it made money. We'd prosecute these folks. We charge them for everything. The time it took to paint it back up, the employees' time, so they'd have to pay the county, when they got to court, and whatever that came out to be. But sometimes it was low, but sometimes it was high, depending on what was damaged and what was destroyed.
I think, one thing is, you don't always see the house. You don't always know about the house gets burgled in your neighborhood, but you see that damn tag on that block wall on the corner every freaking day, and it keeps getting tagged. And I think it just pisses people off. Politicians know that, and they loved it. And the citizens were pissed off about this stuff, and this is one guy doing it, and they'd rather be attached to the guy doing it than trying to prevent him from doing all this stuff. And
I don't know how much of that they do anymore, if they do it at all. But I mean, for a while there, because where we were, we had the whole tagging crew and stuff, and those guys would put good cases together, and those cases often led not to just vandalism, but other things. Absolutely. Or these so-called taggers would eventually turn into, unfortunately, gang members, which led to other things. And it's just like, I worked with the guy at when I first got to Lakewood, and Mike Digby, and he was big on catching the hypes, and you go, hey, one hype's going to lead to 2 burglaries, or and it's it's just nonstop. So a small little thing like that, if you work it right, can always lead to something better or a good informant.
It just, all I know is I was surprised at how much attention it got. I mean, I was just fulfilling a contract obligation, and I think we did it better than anybody else, and it got attention.
I think the guys that were doing that, when we started it, and then it really took off, and a lot of guys learned to write good search warrants, multi-location search warrants, which helped them when they did go to, let's say, a narco or majors, or because they knew how to do that on a smaller scale. But now doing the paperwork
those warrants were way more complicated than writing a TOS, right? And a search warrant. And I told them, I remember telling them, I said, just go along. We're going to train you. Just go along with the program. Me and Louie, go along with the program. And when you're done, you're going to be dropping search warrants on homicide or whatnot that people have not seen. The only people writing these kind of complicated warrants are homicide and maybe, some of the folks who did cybercrime stuff.
Well,
right,
homicide. In fact,
go ahead.
homicide would come down to us and ask us, "Hey, you guys served this warrant on this place here, da 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 da," because they were looking for something there. And these guys got tied into a lot of good stuff, a lot of good cases.
I had a
But,
gang cop. He joined the team. Remember that? And
Yeah.
and he joined detectives. And I said, just because he thought it was beneath him, I said, no. What you're going to learn is doing the station detective stuff here at Transit and doing the graffiti stuff. You're going to get a lot more skill sets, and you're going to be much more effective as a gang cop. And I saw him a couple years later after he went off to be a gang cop, OSS, and he came back. He says, "You're exactly right. A lot of the gang cops, they only know a couple pages in the penal code. I know the whole penal code, and I know how I can get in people's houses."
Yeah,
with a
once
lot
you
of
know,
crimes.
not only that, but once you know the monikers and you go into these houses, there's other things there that you're going to see, and you just learn and form an expertise in that. So that's what really helps. But yeah, those are good times. I mean, we had good crews, we had good guys that wanted to work.
Yep.
A lot of them were just off training, and here you throw them into.
But here's the deal about that comment, though, is relate back to the movie. The media was so happy for us. We got all kinds of resources, way more than when we first started, and we got support, which Buford was getting support because of his big stick. Okay, we are at the halfway mark. It is time for our commercial break, guys. You got about 2 minutes. If you have something to do, I'll see you in about 2 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Well, they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then. There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Well, they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief. We are reviewing the movie Walking Tall with Joe Don Baker, who passed away recently. Great movie about a true story of Buford Pusser in McNairy County in Tennessee. And this all happened in the 60s, basically. I think the movie came out in early 70s, 73. Remember to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Rumble. Help us get over 1,000 people on Rumble, please, if you're listening to us and watching us there. And we got one of the regular visitors to our show that's here, Tom Baker. Welcome back, Tom. Anyways, hey, Martine, let's go ahead and roll with the next scene, because I think I've been doing too much yakking. I got to catch up here. So this is elected sheriff. So he gets his payback, and of course they come after him and they prosecute him. So the legal system is coming after him, and they arrest him, and he ends up in court. Now, I think the funniest thing about the whole court scene is these guys all coming in, particularly the guy in the body cast. See that he's in the body cast, and he's got the one guy's got the two arms up, and he's in the body cast, and he wins. I think basically they had Buford cold dead to rights, but they did do a big dramatic scene in the scene where he shows his chest and his cuts, and a lot of this was dramatized. This is a small town. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows these guys are corrupt, and they tolerate it, right? But now one of their favorite sons is beat up. The son of a former police officer, and stabbed and cut up, and everybody knows it. And so, what does the jury do? They nullify it. They say no, he's not guilty, even though he probably is guilty. And with his big stick here. And then he decides to run for sheriff in McNairy County. So Buford had no chance but to fight back. Yeah. Well, you know what? Or leave. And that's the good people, they want to leave. And this guy, obviously he's not going to do that. He's decided this is where he's going to raise his family. And this is the homestead for his family. So of course he's got to do that. But I didn't do the court scene, Cliff, but I got to get your comments. I thought that was probably the funniest part of the movie when these guys.
That was, yeah, just the visual of those guys sitting in the front row with their all beat the heck. Oh, yeah, that was really good. Yeah.
And of course they have the corrupt judge who's doing everything he can to help convict him because he doesn't like Buford, right? Buford challenged him. Why aren't you doing this stuff? Calling him corrupt, calling the sheriff corrupt.
That was really realistic because, in on the East Coast, it's mostly justice courts until you get to a felony like that would be. But, a lot of the misdemeanor cases would be, the local farmer was the justice of the peace, and you'd be arraigning people in front of him. And maybe I used to take prisoners to the dairy barn and have them arraign them in the back seat right next to the cows. And
really?
Yeah. I'd have to go to the farm and go see Judge Locke, and he's at the barn. Okay. And then I'd go tell the judge, hey, I got something in the back seat. Let me come out.
That's funny.
He'd write a commitment right there on the back of the police car, and I'd take him away. Yeah.
Well, but you know what? Here's the thing about it. I can't remember running across the corrupt judge. But here's the thing. I did some research. I did a show. It's coming up. I recorded it, and it'll show first week of June because I'll be traveling, right? So I'm doing a show on Wednesday, and then that one will show the following Wednesday. And I was looking at the donations, and a lot of these judges, they get donations from folks, right? And because they got to run. In many states, they can be appointed or they can run, and many times if they stay seated, they have to run, right? So the gal in Minnesota, she put up her own money to run. This is the one that's indicted by the feds. And then she got a bunch of money from attorneys, no doubt, that had business in her court, right? And that wasn't unusual too, right? Because I worked West Hollywood, and we went to Beverly Hills Court. Now, the thing about Beverly Hills Court is you're catching cases from West Hollywood and Beverly Hills. And the attorneys operating there, you tended to deal with mostly private attorneys who are top notch because they're making big money, right? And they, of course, give donations. And you knew every now and then that one of the cases that was like one of your cases was dismissed by a judge, and you had a solid case, but they would dismiss it for, de minimis, drugs or this or that, or some technicality would get dismissed. And I was always suspicious about that stuff. And then every now and then the judge would say, okay, Danny, hey, you're an attorney in her court. She sees you all the time. She'd give you a case. So she'd take it from the public defenders and give you a public case, and then they get paid. So there's a lot of reasons for people to donate to the judge. And so these judges, they're supposed to be above the law, but they do have a constituency, a more enhanced or whatever constituency. They got to pay it back, right, Danny? That does happen.
It comes right back to what? Follow the money. everybody's getting paid somewhere. I mean, and you're right. I mean, judges or but yeah, they have their own little pool of people that they cater to.
Yeah, I always like in Beverly Hills. I always knew if there was there was one of those cases that was kind of a tie, but it really should have been. That sometimes the judge side with the defense, and okay. And it was funny. The judges were always good to you. They never, how dare you? They just said, oh well, I just think this, or suddenly the suppression hearing goes the way of the defense for and it's a really ticky tacky case, or it's not a end of the world kind of case. So maybe it's just a simple possession case, and they just let it go. And because I arrested this guy for drunk driving, and he was the boyfriend of a really wealthy guy, and I ended up in a 2-week trial for drunk driving and drugs with this guy. And there's no way this guy had the money to do that with private attorneys, 2 private attorneys. And it was because the sugar daddy was paying for him. And of course we lost. But that's the kind of, when money flowing around like that, every now and judge, because, the judge is getting money for re-election campaigns. Well, you know what? I'll throw a case to this guy, or suddenly this guy's case wins and that kind of stuff. So money, right? You said, Denny, follow the money.
But did you, I take it you saw the video from the Minnesota judge?
I did. Actually, you got to watch my show June 4th, because that is the one.
Is that something or what?
I pulled up her indictment, and I read her indictment. I went over the indictment. It's even worse than you think. Right down to she's looking in the hallway to make sure the coast is
exactly. She's sending the DEA agents on a witch hunt somewhere else. Luckily, 2 of the agents stayed in the hallway.
Yeah, I know.
There's pick them off.
There's certain people in that case that deserve a gold star. It's the agents that stayed in the hallway, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was one. At least one stayed in the hallway, and the deputy working the courthouse, he went to the agents that he saw what the judge was doing. And he went to the agents who were at the chief judge and say, hey, she's dismissing his case or suspending his case, and she's trying to get him out of here. Yeah. So that guy deserved a gold star. They didn't put his name in the reports, and I imagine he's probably, because they were all lefties over there.
Oh,
he's taking some heat for.
And as soon as he hits the door, the foot chase is on.
I know. Yeah, I know. You got to watch the show, because I go through the whole indictment. I go through the indictment, and then I go through the criminal complaint written by the FBI, which is kind of funny. So
yeah, but you got to see the video, because I had heard about it, and you hear it, but until you actually see it, it's like,
all right.
Kidding me.
So we got to explain for the audience. Anytime somebody's looking to see if the coast is clear for cops, that you're guilty. Yeah. You're guilty. Because that little coast, is the coast clear? That is the consciousness of guilt right there, and they got it on video.
Yeah.
And who are the witnesses against her?
The guard,
the agents.
Yeah.
FBI agents, DHS agents, ICE agents, DEA agents, the deputy sheriffs that worked the courthouse, because they quoted them all. The prosecuting attorney on the case. Officers of the court, those are the witnesses against her. How do you wiggle out of that? I don't know. We'll see if jury notification happens up there. That's what they're saying. She's probably hoping for that. But
it's pretty obvious when the guard at the front door there goes and tells the DEA agent, "Hey, something's up here."
Yeah. So here's the case where he's he's trying to figure out, because he's busting up these stills here, right? So he's elected sheriff, and he's trying to take out these stills, and he needs the help, because leading up this, he finds out from a neighboring county that 8 black men died of bad moonshine. And that happens, right? They make it bad and they sell it anyways, right? And people die. Now you see this, not that long ago, this was going on in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
They were putting bad alcohol in premium alcohol bottles, and people were, it was killing them.
What was happening? These large restaurants and hotels were buying it.
Yeah, they're buying it, right? And they're not testing it, right? And so and just to increase their profit margin, that's what they're doing. So the cartels were involved down in Mexico, but these guys are also involved in it. And so he's busting the stills, and it was one of the things, as we talked about when we did the show earlier, moonshine was kind of, this had started way back in the Washington days. When I say Washington, I mean George Washington days. There was the Shays Rebellion. There's all this stuff, and so this has been. But when you start taxing it, you can't have illegal moonshine because you can't tax it, right? And a lot of these guys are struggling. But in this case, when Buford's going at it, I just said, okay, I'm looking at this from a cop standpoint. Everybody wants their alcohol, so why is Buford going at it? Because the same people doing this are doing prostitution, doing gambling, murdering, and robbing, right? So if the easy way to get to these guys is to take them down for moonshining, kind of like we did with tagging, that's what we're going to do, right? Right, Danny?
Yep.
And so that's what he's doing. That's why he's focusing on this. And you get these minor vice crimes, and it leads to bigger stuff, right, Cliff?
Exactly.
That's right. Yeah.
So let's see here. Gambit, I like Cop in 1998. Which, yeah, I would work that movie job. I worked that movie job, Gambit, and I criticized the technical advisor on the uniforms they had for deputy sheriffs because it was based in West Hollywood. So they put me in a scene.
Good.
So I think they got the back of my head. I still had hair, so you wouldn't recognize me there. So, yeah, I like the movie Cop too. It was a good movie. Okay, let's see. So we hit up the moonshine so that we can get to the bigger stuff. Let's see. I got some notes here. Ideas about reality and very far apart. Yeah, they talk about ideals and realities. Like, they're talking to Buford. Well, Buford, you have this idealistic view, and then there's the reality, right? I guess that was my thing with West Hollywood. I had this idealistic view that rapes were important and everybody would want to do something about that. And there was reality. It cost them money, so they didn't want to talk about it. So, but in this case, it's a little more serious. It's about bribes. That's what it's all about, right? Okay, we got to talk about it. The next scene is bar inspections. Now, I wanted, we could talk about the movie stuff, but I wanted to talk about the technical aspect of policing on this one. Now, I like I said, I worked in night car, and in nightclubs, I don't know if you're aware of this, Danny, but in nightclubs, you have certificates, dance certificates, you have, occupancy certificates, right? You have you have the ABC license stuff, right? You have food service license stuff. And so there's all this regulatory stuff that you can use to control these guys. And that we use. Remember the ABC cards, Danny? Did you ever do those things?
Yeah, we did them down in we used to have those, like, I did most of those like in Artesia, because they're those small mom and pop bars down near Chivas. So we go into there, and Hawaiian Gardens, not Paramount, not too much, but Bellflower.
Yeah, I forget what the title. I call it an ABC card, but I want to say it was an incident card. And what it was is, if a station was on their game, yeah, Prince of the City is another great movie. If a station was on their game, they would do an ABC card for every bar fight.
Mm-hmm.
Every time they arrested a drunk who was sleeping in front of the bar.
There's usually a file cabinet with those ABC cards.
Yes.
That we kept.
So you had bars. Exactly, and then if there was a place was a problem, if the lieutenant was on his game, the DB lieutenant, he'd give ABC a call, and he'd give them all of these ABC cards and say, this is what's got going on. And then you'd start working, or, if they were right, they would go talk to the people. All right, you need to hire security. You need to do this. You need to stop serving people when they're clearly drunk. You need to do this. You need to do that. And if you don't, then we'll bring in ABC. But this is what Buford's doing in the scene, right? He's using all of these regulatory powers to squeeze these folks, right? That's what he's doing. And those are all the rules that they bribe the politicians to ignore. Right? That's what's going on here. And he's not going to be bribed, and he's going to do whatever he wants, and he's going to use those minor regulatory things to squeeze these guys. Right, Cliff? That's how they.
Yeah, I used to read the ABC laws, and I used to know that they had to display that license behind the bar in a visible place, and any law enforcement officer had the right to go behind the bar and inspect that license. And I used to do that every once in a while, just because I knew what I could do.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys notice what's going on in New York right now. I don't know if you guys have been following it. I had a couple guests come on my show. They've been on a couple times, and I've been on theirs. It's NYPD's Finest Unfiltered. I don't know if you get a chance to watch that one. It's a great podcast. And so the former commissioner, Ed Caban, so the commissioner of the NYPD, the commissioner's brother was running a private outfit, where bars and restaurants could contract with him, and he would make sure they weren't interfered with by the police. Right. So what you're seeing here in McNairy County was happening until recent. Well, it's still happening in New York. It's still happening in New York. And he was appointed by Eric Adams. And these guys were going to the clubs. The assistant chief, Caban, they were going to these very same clubs that were protected by Caban's, the commissioner's brother, who was taking money from these guys to make sure they weren't raided. And the FBI is investigating. That's what a lot of what's going on in the senior levels and now they have a female who was never a cop, who's their commissioner, because all of the people at the top were seen as corrupt.
Well, I just want to know what organized crime in New York felt about, how they felt about that.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's correct. They were running a protection racket, Danny,
Yeah.
and it was, and organized crime used to do it, right? And now here you got the senior management of the police department, but not only just the police department, the fire department. They indicted 2 assistant chiefs and one just pled guilty, and they were holding up their fire licenses they were giving licenses, occupancy license, because that's the fire guys, right? And their fire code certificates, whatever, for pay. Yeah, we'll make sure you get it. You just got to pay us, right? Or you'll get it sooner because you got to pay us. And so what we're seeing here is happening in the biggest municipality in our country and at the highest levels. It's crazy. It's crazy. So but I want to say in LA, yeah, we had our little corruption scandals, but I don't remember anything like this. Maybe one guy tipping off some massage parlors I'm familiar with. Yeah, you know which one I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
What a knucklehead, right?
Oh my God.
I think they were going to make him captain at that place,
Yeah, they were. No doubt.
Till he got caught. And I think
Yeah.
it was the feds that were doing stuff there.
That's right. Yeah.
So, and I don't think he was taking his bribes and pay, though.
No, he wasn't.
It was something else.
Yeah.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So, but this is a good scene too. This is where the black guy goes on a disturbance call, or he goes to do a bar check, and these rednecks come in to disturb this. Basically, it was a bar that mostly served blacks, but these 6 guys come in, and our black deputy, and they did have a black deputy on the force at the time. It didn't kind of code. My understanding is that it didn't play out the way it was here, where Buford got an old friend. It was somebody that had been on the department before Buford came on. And he tells him the story. Well, so I think this was a dramatization, do what you got to do. And he goes into the bar, gets in a knockdown drag out, kind of like you're talking about, Cliff, one guy. And you seen him with one guy kind of handcuffed, and he's backing out with the rest at gunpoint. And
we had, there was in my little village, just outside our village in the 70s, it was the Blue Lantern. It was an all black club. And I remember my dad got in a big melee there by himself. And then he had to go back the next day to get his breakaway tie, and his hat was thrown off into the mud. And it was just like that, though. It was all black club, all the Blue Lantern.
I remember I told the story over the weekend when I was went on a domestic call, and the guy who beat up his girlfriend, she managed to get out, and I got through the door, and he kicked it shut, and it was an automatic locking thing. And so it was just me and him, and the fight was on. And he wasn't a bad sized guy, but he wasn't fit. I was. And he had this white motif everywhere. Everything was white rug, white this, white furniture. And by the time we're done, there was a lot of red, and it wasn't mine. Yeah. But he ripped my badge off my shirt. He had ripped my shirt, and I ended up, I broke his nose, and I broke one of his orbits, because I'm in a one-on-one fight. And all right, game on, here we go. And I was at the time, God, I think it was 25, and I was bench pressing 300 pounds. Could run forever. I wasn't huge. I was like 185. But I
Wow.
was very strong. I didn't look it, but and I used to start out my workouts on a 100-pound body bag. So I'd 15 minutes on a 100-pound body bag, and then I'd do my workouts, right? I mean, I didn't really talk about that much at work, but when I got in a fight, people got hurt when they tried to hurt me. And he did, right? He did. But a couple weeks later, I'm working the desk, and the guy walks in. Well, it was more than a couple weeks, probably a couple months later, because he was healed up a little bit, or at least he wasn't having bandages on. And they go to the desk lady, and I'm working watch deputy, and they said, "Hey, they want to talk to Deputy Jordan." You? Oh, okay. I recognize. Oh, I think that's the guy. I go out, and I had C-lined the damaged to county uniform. Well, the judge made him write a check and bring it to me and pay for my shirt and apologize to me. So when I saw this scene where the guy gets his shirt all ripped off, I kind of I related, right? Because somebody had done that to me. So but I got my shirt paid for, and and the guy, and if you see in the scene, the white dude, he actually pays. Let me pay for your shirt.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
Did you ever have a uniform damage? Did you ever do that where you wrote C-line damage to county property?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And get somebody to pay it back to you?
No.
I don't know if I ever got paid back for it, but shirts got ripped and equipment got damaged.
I was stunned. I never looked at to see who the judge, because I was fairly active, so I know the judges probably recognized my name, and he probably said, "You're going to go pay Deputy Jordan and apologize to him." So I don't know if they actually wrote that in as punishment, but he did it. So all right, we did bar inspection. So, and that's my story about getting my shirt ripped off. And but let's here, this is the part where he's going. This is where they talk about where he's going into the clubs and he's doing this. He's doing these inspections, and they're talking about they come together. All the criminal element come together at State Line, and they're talking, what are we going to do with this guy? There's a couple things that they said here that I don't know if you caught, but one of them is national papers are playing up the big stick. I kind of talked about that earlier. So he became, to some degree, they couldn't do anything right away because they were they sent the guy from Nashville down to try and bribe him, and they're trying to find other ways to handle it, because he became kind of a little bit of a cult hero with that big stick. He was almost untouchable because of who he was, right? Because he was
right.
He'd become a little bit of a local celebrity. But of course, they eventually. But one of the things you also heard, you heard one of the guys say it, and I think the Karen was Towhead White. They said, "Well, I got a couple guys from Alabama that can come up here and take care of this." And for me, that was like, having done the research, I go, this is a couple guys from Phoenix, Alabama. That's what that was about. And the person that they believe is responsible for this is a guy named Kersey Nix. Did you ever hear that name before?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So Kersey Nix is a member of the Dixie Mafia. They always felt that he was responsible for assassinating Buford's wife. But he was involved in a case, for the audience, he was involved in a case where he's in prison in Angola for murder, and he does this Lonely Hearts scam. So he reaches out through gay magazines to men and says that I'm in Atlanta or whatever, and writes to him, and he needs money, and the guys are sending money, and he pulls together about $100,000 that he's going to use for his appeal to get out on this murder case, and he gets ripped off by his crime partners. And so then he hires people who are his partners on this, to go after the people who he thinks ripped him off, and it was alleged that a guy named Judge Sherry, let me get their names right. So it was in Biloxi, Mississippi. So if you look up Biloxi, Mississippi, Dixie Mafia, and Sherry, you'll hear this whole story. And so they hire somebody to go murder the people that he thinks, that it's a judge and his wife, who's a city council person. It was inferred that they had stolen his money, and that wasn't true. It was actually the mayor of Biloxi, who was his lawyer, who stole this money. And so this guy Kersey Nix, he's a bad dude, and they could never make the case. That's why I was interested that they exhumed a Buford wife's body, that are they trying to make a case on this? They could never make a case on Curzon Nixon. He's Jr. and he's denied it, but that's who they think is responsible, and he certainly is responsible for other murders and certainly contract murder. And they did eventually convict him. I think he's now in federal prison now for that scam for money law. What's it when you go from one state to another? What do they call it?
Wire fraud.
Yeah, there you go. Wire fraud, Danny. Thank you. So they got him on a bunch of other stuff, and now they took him out of Angola, and he's in federal prison now. And I don't think he's ever getting out. But interesting story. Interesting story. So let's go on. This is, I think, the first assassination attempt. Yeah, it is. This is the first assassination attempt, and we got to talk a little bit about the tactics here on Buford. So he's driving down a country road, right? And I think this is the scene. And he sees this gal drives past him, right? And she's a good-looking gal, and she kind of waves at him, and she's speeding. He obviously thinks she's a drunk driver, right? And he pursues her. She pulls over, and he walks up, and he gets shot. I believe that this is the scene. Okay, so, and that's the first time, right? That's the first time. So, I mean, tactics, Danny. You saw the scene. If you're training somebody and they did these tactics, right, you'd be having a serious conversation with them, right?
Yeah, but at that time, Buford didn't carry a gun.
Yeah, that was part of it. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's 100% true in that, but that was implied in the movie.
Yeah.
Somebody else said that. Yeah, no, he always carried a gun. But the tactics of walking up on this.
Yeah.
We're horrible.
He's by himself too, out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, that's another thing. We're so used to being in big city, and there's always somebody around or somebody just down the road, maybe 10 minutes. But this guy's backup's probably hours away.
This right, but this is why traffic stops are so crazy. I've told this story occasionally. I didn't even think about it till like 30 years later. Somebody was asking me to give him a story. It was Robert Rankel. He was writing a book on his experience, and he said he remembered something and asked me. And I go, I'll tell you, the first time somebody tried to kill me, it was actually on a traffic stop. It was on DeLongpre. You always remember where somebody tries to kill you, and what kind of car they're driving and who they were. It imprints something in your memory. And I was just a young guy. I was on training, and my training officer said, I want to see you approach the car. It was at night. It was all lit up. And they're in a Datsun B210. So it was a small car, two white dudes. I can't remember the violation. And we do the whole offset thing. Lights are on. And so I'd say, well, I'll just approach on the passenger side because I'm the bookman, right? And I approach out of the cone of light. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So they can't really see me because the lights are shining. And you know how it is when you pull somebody over, they're kind of just looking around. They're, where they at, they're a little antsy, and they're, just like that, Cliff. They might be looking ahead, but they're at least looking to see where you're coming up. But both these guys, the driver and the passenger, were staring intently out the driver's window. And I go, God, that is so freaking odd. I mean, I hadn't been doing it very long, but that was odd. Why are they doing that? Why aren't they, that's so weird. And so, I got really suspicious. So I pulled out my 38, my trusty 38, and I hit him with my flashlight, my stream light, and said, let me see your hands. And then you hear the big thunk. The guy was carrying a Browning automatic in his hand. The passenger was waiting for whoever came to that driver's door window to shoot, just like you see in Buford's scene here, right? And so I always think, I'm glad I listened to my tactics in the academy and followed them because they saved my life, right? Because I'm sure my FTO was like, I'm going to watch him, see how he does. And he was going to critique me afterwards, right? And so if I did it wrong, very good chance I could be dead, right? But I did it all right. And my tactics, in my opinion, my tactics saved me that life. Now, they were looking the wrong way. Even if they wanted to swing around and get me, they were at a disadvantage because they're a small car. And so they gave it up. And they were a couple of dope dealers. They had an 8-ball of coke in the trunk of the car. So yeah, these traffic stops, in my opinion, are incredibly dangerous. And that's why I looked at his tactics. I'm going, he's killing me on these tactics, just walking right up to the driver's door. Even if it's a woman, you just go slow. You look in the back seat. You do all that stuff.
Traffic stops are always your number one because you have no way to you can prepare mentally and tactically, but you still don't know what's in that car.
And here's the deal: when you can deal with crooks all the time, but when they're trying to ambush you, this was an ambush on him and the guys that were trying to kill me. It was an ambush. They were going to ambush me, right? And that's what you have to be careful on these traffic stops, particularly on lonely roads where you're by yourself, right, Cliff?
Yeah, this wouldn't seem unusual though, because I know our sheriff would, in upstate New York, he was, to him it's going to be a back road like that. Only locals are going to be on. He's going to know every family within 50 miles of there, and I'm sure he would get lackadaisical and do stuff like that. It probably goes with the way things probably happened.
Yeah, what's that? Complacency kills.
Yeah. Familiarity breeds contempt, right? Yeah.
I haven't heard it said that way. Familiarity breeds contempt, and complacency kills.
Yeah.
But like Cliff said, and Cliff probably knows from experience working in a small department, back east, is that you like you said, you get complacent, you know everybody, or you think you do.
Yeah.
You just continue to do things. And I think it's probably a little bit more harder because I know a guy that worked for our department for many years, went to Texas after he retired, got into law enforcement again, and ended up in a situation where he was by himself out in the middle of nowhere in Texas at a gas station with 2 meth heads. And I told him, why are you doing this? You don't need to push the envelope. You're out there. He goes, yeah, I got to thinking about that. I didn't feel quite comfortable out there all by myself. It wasn't like being back in LA. And he ended up retiring a couple months later because it just wasn't worth it. But if you grow up in that scenario and you get used to it, it's no different than us pulling over somewhere in Willowbrook in the middle of early mornings. But at least you've got a partner maybe 15 minutes farthest from you. I don't know if I'd be comfortable doing that when I knew my backup was in bed asleep.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those guys don't roll, and Cliff probably knows it. They get calls at night. Hey, wake them out of bed like a fireman. Hey, there's somebody over there vandalized. You got to roll out there.
Yeah.
Guess who's doing that?
Who?
Dan Finkelstein.
Well, I don't want to bring up names, but I don't think he's doing that anymore.
I talked to him just a few months ago, but
is he still doing it?
Huh?
Was he still doing it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
But, I don't know. I the money's not worth it to me. I can't do it anymore. I got disability pension though, so I'm out. Even if I foolishly thought I wanted to do it. I'm out. All right, but he's getting better. But everybody's sending him gifts, and even the bad guys that don't like him are sending him gifts. Here's your message. Everything. We can send you wine. We can send you cigars. We can send you, sipping whiskey. You can be living the life of Riley if you just go along, or you can get more of the lead treatment, right? This is what you're hearing here, and this is the guy that was. He's the guy that came along with them after the old sheriff was gone and worked with them. And he appreciated, you could tell he appreciated the fact that Buford was honest, and he's worried. He's seeing this new attitude with Buford, but Buford, he hasn't changed his values. He's going to enjoy all the stuff that's sent to him, but he's still going to do his job. He's still going to do his job, and he's just still going to go after these guys. And you see that in the next scene when he plans the raids. So, but I don't know. I forget, he got shot multiple times on this one. Obviously, low caliber type stuff, and because of his size, and they talked about that, is because of his size that he probably survived it. So, what do you think?
They even said his wrestling background. Him being able to physically survive it. Yeah,
and you can, we're Grady here is the name of the character. He's worried that his attitude has changed. Maybe he's going to flip, but his attitude hasn't changed. He does have an informer. He knows, the other thing, he does have an informant, and you find that out later. Who gives them information, and that happens all the time. When I work the streets, these prostitutes stuff, they'll talk to you all the time. If you just, I don't want to say treat them with respect, if you're just professional,
Yeah, that's right.
They'll talk. You get a lot more with sugar than you know, and honey
Yeah.
than you do with spice, right? And
Yeah, that's right.
I never tried to understand why they were doing it. I would always tell them, you know, you're killing yourself doing this, and you know, you show a little bit of concern, obviously keeping the professional distance, you know, and they'll still give you information. There's some guys that didn't know about keeping that professional distance. I had no problem keeping that distance. You know,
Yeah.
danger Will Robinson with a lot of that stuff is the way I looked at it. You know, there were some guys who partook in that stuff, and they would eventually get caught. And I always thought, aren't you guys worried about diseases and all that stuff? You know, but you know, sometimes their sexual thinking takes over and they do all these bad things, right? All right, let's get into the raids, because this is we got 3 more scenes I think we got to do here, 4 more scenes actually, I think. And this is he's gonna get a little bit of payback. He's doing these raids, and I think this is the one where somebody's tipping him off, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so he's not catching anything. And so they're hiding everything. And, you know, that's where the one guy we talked about, Cliff, that's what would happen. And, you know, the guy tipped off some massage parlors about some
That's
raids,
right, yeah.
and they cleaned up their act. And unfortunately, electronic media now.
Yeah, that's right.
They got him, and he was. I don't know if he was ever prosecuted. I think they tried to prosecute. Maybe he settled out of court for a minor thing. I don't know. But he was definitely gone, and his career was definitely over, and it was certainly a few years before the magic retirement age.
Yeah, and he was set to be captain for sure.
Yeah, they loved him. They loved him. And well, I mean, given my story that I told, you know, I guess I'm not surprised. So
yeah, that's right.
Yes, I'm not surprised. But he is doing a raid here now. I think this is the one where he's actually successful. He's taking people to jail and just filling up the buses. And here's this is actually a true story. This lady did try to kill him. This is a true situation. She kind of ran the motel there. She killed her husband, who owned it, and then it fell to her. But she killed him during a domestic thing where he was abusive, and so she got off. And now she owned the place, and she was kind of a leader in this state line crew, the state line mafia. And here's the guy where he's talking about, I can bring up a couple guys from Alabama, like I talked about, Phoenix, Alabama. And they're tired of Buford, and they're going to take another shot at Buford. So they already tried to kill him once. And she says, oh, we really got to do something. And she decides she's going to try and do something, right? That she's going to take Buford out. And I think if I read up on the story, I don't think it was a shotgun that she used. I think it was a handgun she used. And oh yeah, there's an interesting story. Yeah, this budget was a $500,000 budget, and it made $40 million. So it was I guess the audience, because this became kind of a cult classic for a lot of folks.
Yeah, that's right.
Like Billy Jack, it became a cult, and it made a ton of money for a little bit of money, which is why it inspired so many remakes.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So they do the raids, and now they're pissed, and they want to take him down, right? And this is all organized. So here they're having their discussion. I've operated down here for 20 years. So these are ingrained crooks. This is their lifestyle. Kind of like when you talk about the Hawaiian Garden families, the families that controlled neighborhoods. I forget the name of the family, but I want to say it was Glassell Park or Echo Park. And even LAPD, it was LAPD's area. They wouldn't go into it because it was on a cul-de-sac, and they controlled the whole block, and everybody on the block was on, working with them. And if they didn't work with them, they chased them out. And it was a Latino family, and it was the mom who was kind of running it, just like this lady running it, right? And so they're pissed, and they're having their meeting. This scene also shows the interconnectedness in the different criminal operations. So you got the prostitute people working with the bootleggers, working with, the thieves and the robbers. And I think the big guy here does try to to kill Buford here in this latest scene, and Buford takes him out. And I don't know if this is dramatization. I remember 3 attempts: the shooting when he was doing the traffic stop, the shooting when he goes to the bar and the lady tries to kill him, and then the shooting where his wife was killed. That's when I was reading. I remember all of that stuff. I don't remember this thing where they came to his house. And there is some creative license that they're taking with the story, right, Cliff? That happens on all true stories, right?
Yeah. And I know he was shot 8 times and stabbed 7 or something, but maybe that was numerous on one occasion or something.
They usually add a little something in there.
Yeah.
Well, as we all know, there's a lot of boring downtime between exciting stuff in law enforcement, so they had to make this a little more exciting, I think. And here's one of the crime partners deciding he's going to do it on his own, and he's got a rifle and a shotgun, and still our guy takes him out with, I don't know, that looked like a 686 to me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It doesn't look like a 4-inch barrel there.
No way.
Here's the other thing, Danny. I hated this. I hate this whole cross draw look that they put on TV. It drives me nuts.
I know it. Yeah.
It's not a good way to store your weapon. It doesn't allow you to come on target quickly. In fact, because if you're drawing and you're crossing off to come on target, what do? You overrun your target, right? And then
I never liked it either.
Right, but if you're coming from your hip and you're coming up, you might overrun center of mass, but you're still pointing at his head, right? And then you come back down to center of mass. Much tactically better way to go. It drove me crazy when I saw this guy doing cross draw, but I guess it looks cool.
Yeah.
But it's dumb in my mind. I don't know. Did you notice that? I know.
Yeah, it's dumb. I don't like it.
I didn't like it all because I'm thinking, this guy's a former Marine. I'm thinking he's got to know how to shoot, and But if they did it 100 years ago, then it must be good, right? So they keep.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so here he is, get his dog killed, and all the family cries.
Yeah.
That's why I think there's dramatization here, because I do not remember reading this in real life.
I don't either.
That this particular attempt happened, right? But they're still going to go for him. I think after this scene, go ahead and roll right with the jewelry theft setup robbery. And this is, so these are robbers too, but here's our lady. She's already set up, so I don't show the jewelry theft. So this traveling jewelry salesman guy, I don't know why he's going to go there. Maybe he made some quick sales in the past, and he goes in there with his box full of jewelry. He's trying to make some sales. And they go and they rip off his jewelry from his trunk, $60,000 worth, which is a lot back in the 60s.
Yeah,
right. And they know he's going to go report it.
Yeah,
they know it, and Buford's going to be salivating. Oh, great. Now I don't have to work out about ticky-tack, what alcohol you're serving, and do you have enough size on your dance floor? I can now go and all I have to do is do a search warrant and find the jewelry on the place, and then I can take people to jail for some serious felonies, right?
Yeah.
And so they know he's coming back, and she's sitting there with her shotgun. And so this is a true story. I think the only thing that's a little different about this is the type of weapon used that she shoots at Buster with. Now, how do you miss with a shotgun that close? But she misses him. She hits somebody else.
I think she shoots the jewelry guy.
I thought he came in with another cop right on the side. Maybe we'll see.
Maybe he is.
Maybe that is a jewelry guy right there, and he gets hit. But I think in real life, that's not how this went down. I thought it was a handgun she was using in real life, but I could be wrong. Yeah, they walk in. There's the jewelry guy, and there's Buford. But I think he's got some cops with him, and she's laying in wait for him. So this was a setup, and this did happen, and he did kill a lady. And I think I remember in real life it was a headshot. You see that in this, which brings up why you had the R rating, Cliff, or who looked up.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, right. I mean,
here he is. He's shooting back. Well, they do show the bloody scenes in this, right? She gets hit.
Shoots her right in the eye.
He gets, and
yeah. Well, then you did have the lady who was being tortured, right? Because she was totally naked on the bed.
Yeah,
that too.
That might be the R. Yeah.
Then you have the girl that turns out to be his informant at the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
When she comes out. In that
Yeah, there
see-through-
wasn't much hiding her. Yeah, her.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
There
Yeah.
wasn't much hiding her assets. That's for sure. So, and here he goes home. He's having a conversation. This is the whole PSTD thing. You just got a shooting, just killed somebody. Even superheroes like Buford Busser have PSTD, right?
That's right.
That's somebody tries to kill you, you have to kill them. It imprints something on your brain, and you're going to remember that forever. And you're going to have some of those moments, right? Right, Danny? You're going to you got those memories forever, right?
Oh, you sure do.
Yeah.
You do.
There was a point in time as a sergeant, I made the decision because they said, Sarge, come on over and see this. I was at Carson, and I won't tell the scene, but because it was nasty. And I said, why did you guys invite me over to see this? I don't need these memories anymore.
Yeah, right. I don't want this in my brain.
You don't need me to explain to you how to do, a containment of this.
Yeah, you keep, the work ones. The work ones still sneak up on you once in a while, things that you've seen or saw. But the one that sneaks up on me was maybe because I was defensive was that Route 91 thing. Not having, not having a weapon on you when you're getting shot at is kind of puts things in perspective. But
you were there, huh? Wow, man.
What station was that, Danny? Is it
in Las Vegas, right?
Oh, yeah.
The Las Vegas shooting.
Wow, you were there then when that happened?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was probably the Carson lobby shooting, and then the train crash, Danny. That one.
Oh,
yeah. That one, I whenever there's a mass casualty incident, I just get all these
images,
feelings.
That was the one out in Moore Park, right?
Yeah, like Chatsworth.
Link.
Yeah,
that one. And then I was at I was like the second person at the Aero Mexico one in Cerritos.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That one, and then of course the Route 91. So yeah, I've been kind of.
Yeah, they're imprinted on you, and you can see that in the scene. Okay, here's the wife's murder. This is probably the most, the saddest part of this is here. She's an innocent lady. You hadn't seen her. Okay,
no.
So sometimes the family's going to be in the police car, right?
Yeah.
And in these small towns, right? Sometimes
that's true.
That happens,
yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They'll roll on a call. You think it's just a minor call, and they're in the car because they're going to go do shopping or whatever afterwards, right? That is a small town thing, right?
When I was a kid, I remember being in the back seat and my mom was in the front seat and Dad went to a domestic, and just remember seeing feet going past the window. They were inside fighting. We were outside in the police car. I was like 12.
And so that is not unusual in a small town or small police agency and the sheriff's department, right? And was he issued the car? I mean, was it a car that you could use for errands around town too, or no?
Well, yeah, because my dad was chief, so the car came home with him. So
that car got used for everything, baby.
One time he went down to the drugstore. And he came back. He couldn't help but stop these guys too young in the car. They were in a stolen car. My dad just had his paint overalls on and holding him at gunpoint till deputies came. Jeez.
All right, let's roll with the scene. Martine, wife's murder. Yeah, so it's not unusual when you see this. People go, "Why would his wife be in the car?" That's not unusual for a small
not
town
unusual
or small county sheriffs. It would be really unusual for us here in a big.
Yeah.
And it's not that like my kids had never been in my car when I was dropping off to school before I went to work, but that was unmarked and I wasn't doing police work. But this is. Here he's going to do police work, right?
Yeah.
To a call. It's a setup, and as he's driving there, these two guys. And here's the thing: these big old 60s and 70s cars. Growing up in Detroit, I just remember these big old cars with these engines, and they're coming after him, and they are loaded with Barrett, a lot of guns, and they shoot up the car. They hit her, and you see she takes a round pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
And she's down.
Yeah.
And
Do you think Buford would have been like a little more on his toes by now? Because they've
Yeah.
tried to kill him a couple times. You know, he's got these big old cars that are zooming up behind him. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know how good his police
Yeah.
skills are, but yeah, they open up. Well, in the movie, they open up on him with everything.
Yeah.
well, they already tried once, and so they got to make sure it happens now. And she gets hit right away, and very sad, right? I mean, I don't know what kind of guilt I would have in this whole
Ooh, man, that'd
thing.
be tough. Yeah.
You know, that your wife is killed, and she had been asking you, or it's implied that she didn't want him to do this, but somebody else who had a little more knowledge of the family was that actually she was much more
Yeah,
supportive
this is a
in real
pretty
life.
dramatic scene, especially when the other deputies arrive.
Yeah.
And his
Yeah.
partner, breaks down and uses it.
I went to a call, 2 deputies down, and they were down when I got there. We were the first 2 there, and it kind of is a sobering moment when you get there and you see two deputies down. Fortunately, one was shot, one had broken his collarbone when he was backing out of there of his gun hand, but the suspect who had shot one of the deputies was down as well. So, but yeah, deputy down, and so you see it has emotional response. But he does shoot back here. He's trying to attend to his wife, but they aren't going to just drive by. They want to make sure, and so they come after him and they continue shooting at him. And he does take it. He takes several rounds on this, but he takes one to the jaw, and then he's out, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a sad thing. Obviously, there's dramatization after this as he recovers. And here's the thing: when you have something big like this happen, and we saw it with, Danny, you're familiar with Hawaiian Gardens, right? So when we had a deputy killed down there, it was all hands on deck, right? The feds came in. All local guys helped out if they could. I don't know if LAPD came down to help us up, but I'm sure if we asked, they would have been there, right?
There was help from everybody.
Yeah.
On that one.
And they took out the Hawaiian Garden gangs, right? That's what.
They went in there for at least a year, and just everybody went. Well, everybody in Hawaiian Gardens probably still know we're all on parole for something, and there was a family that ran Hawaiian Gardens too. So, and then you got to throw in the Mexican mafia's influence down there. So, but when that happened, that was a worst nightmare. Everybody went down there.
Yeah, we say that we also saw that when Deputy Escalante was killed he was killed in LAPD's area. Remember that one, Danny?
That was up in the avenues.
That was
that's right, the avenues.
Yeah, and that was LAPD's area. But they asked, since we had deputies running through the city in transit, they asked, hey, will you guys help? And so, of course, and we did what we could. We were doing a lot of FIs while they were doing their work. But when a cop is killed or his wife is killed in the course and scope of his duties, it's all hands on deck. Now, do you remember, it probably would have been the early 80s, Detective Williams from LAPD. He was going to pick up his son at kindergarten. Remember that case, Danny?
Yeah.
And he sees it coming. He was just the detective on a case. And these gang member dope dealers wanted to take him out because he was kind of the linchpin in pulling the case all together. And the guy hired somebody to do it, and the detective saw it coming, and he covered his son, and then he was murdered. He was murdered, and they tried to get some. I want to say some of these crazy leftists tried to get one of the killers out on that thing because they had the guy that talked to the guy who wanted him murdered, and then that guy hired another guy, and that's how that all went down. But LAPD and everybody pulled out the stops to get those guys too. So when you see a cop go down, particularly a pretty vicious murder like this, where it's organized and stuff like that, it's all hands on deck. They're going to take them down. And even though this is a corrupt county, everybody's now on board. In this case, it would be the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. It would be obviously the county sheriff's department, any local cops that help. Obviously, neighboring sheriffs are going to help. Anybody that kind of had corrupt connections, they're going to pull back. They're going to support this because killing somebody's wife is over the top, right? even in this
Yep.
case, right? So you see her going to the hospital. Here's Buford, and I don't know how they do it. I would think they would put the cast on right away, but there's a lot of drainages. But hey, I'm not a doctor, so there's dramatization. Got to have the big cast on his face. And this is where Leif Garrett has his big scene, right? He walks down the hall with his gun, his 22 probably, and he's going to protect his dad. So a lot of dramatization. Somehow, I don't think that probably happened, but it was a good scene, a tearjerker scene, right, Cliff?
Yeah, it was. It was good.
So I remember I was at home once, and they came to tell us that my dad had gotten stabbed at work, and he's a cop, and you're thinking, why would anybody stab my dad? So and I think I was 9 or 10, right? And so it does have an impact on you. You don't, why would they do that? And my dad broke his arm chasing some crook one time, and so why would they hurt my dad? So I can see where this kid is. You don't understand when you're that age, right? And so I think they showed that well, because sometimes they want to show the emotion that the kids go through, but you can only show it in a scene, right? You can't spend an hour trying to tell that story. And I thought that kind of encapsulated that pretty good. What do you think, Danny?
Leif Garrett walking down the hallway and everybody looking at him carrying the rifle and a box of ammo. He's going to go protect his dad. He's not going to let anyone get to him anymore. So, that was a great. I mean, this is a great movie.
Yes,
I think this Walking Tall, the original, is by far better than any of the other things that they made.
Yeah.
All right,
I agree.
We got one more scene. It's called Payback at the Lucky Spot, and this is where Buford recovers enough, and he's going to go and he's going to crash his car. Now, I think this was all dramatization. I know they took them down. They didn't catch the murderers, but like I said, it's all hands on deck, just like Hawaiian Gardens, just like the Avenues with Deputy Escalante. Just like Detective Williams with those thugs that killed him.
Whenever there's a cop involved, it usually everybody pretty much comes up and is ready to take care of business. It's just the same thing with the female deputy that was killed down in Long Beach.
Yeah, just going to work.
Similar to Escalante leaving to work to go to the jail and gets shot out in front of her house. I mean, things like that.
And those are the ones. I think all of those cases, they were killed just because they were cops. You know what I mean? It wasn't like they were in the course and scope of making an arrest. I know the deputy Hawaiian Guards was looking for a bad guy, but he was ambushed in doing that, right?
Well, look at the young kid that got shot in Buena Park years ago in the barbershop with his girlfriend.
Oh yeah. I knew his dad. Yep.
Same thing. They found out he was a cop and they shot him.
Yep. And so this isn't like there is no ambiguity, is what I guess I'm trying to say. They were clearly targeted just because they were police officers or deputy sheriffs, and he was targeted because he was, obviously Buford Pusser doing his job, and it resulted in his wife being killed. And so this scene, although it didn't probably go down this way in real life, it dramatized. I did get them. I did pay them back. I did survive. And unfortunately, not for very long, because obviously we talked about it. He died in a car accident in 1974, the real Buford Pusser, as he was preparing to do the sequel to Walking Tall. He was going to act in it, and he passed away. So good movie, right, Danny?
Yeah. Good movie.
You didn't show the scene though where he pays off as informant and almost gets caught there, but. He does that informant. Who she is? That was Bill Bixby's wife.
Oh, was it really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, what I liked about her, I mean, she's an informant, right? And that's kind of a dangerous thing to do, as we find out, is she realizes they think it's one of the other girls.
Yeah.
And she gets on the phone and she says, "Hey, man, you got to come down and save this girl." And Buford does. And I think in that scene, I didn't do that scene. He kind of picks that guy up, and I think that scene kind of shows just how big this guy is in real life, right? Because I think that the thing about it is a lot of the stuff is, that comes right from Buford Pusser. These scenes, he tells the story, And so I think there's a lot of truth to the movie, but there's a lot of fictionalization, and they have to somehow demonstrate that they did take these guys out without doing another 2 hours of how they took them out. They just show it in a car crash through the front door. And so, Cliff, good movie making and good true story, right?
Good movie making, good storytelling, and based on a true story. And so backed up by real events, but told in a great way.
All right, oh yeah, there was they did a remake. It was a Swedish actor, Bo. I can't think of.
Bo Svensson.
It wasn't ever the same.
No, it was not. No,
it was entertaining. It was entertaining, but it was. Yeah, you're right. It wasn't the same.
He was the best one because then The Rock did a remake too, and that was.
Yeah, that's right.
That was entertaining, but it wasn't as impactful.
Well, it didn't have the grit.
Right.
These movies in the 70s just had, I don't know if it was the way they filmed them or, the way they came out, but they just had a different feeling of grit, like Billy Jack or, Serpico and things like that. It was just a whole different.
One thing I didn't get into, and we should talk a little bit before we sign off here, is these guys didn't make a lot of money, right, Cliff?
No, not at all. These guys, you don't get paid very much.
Yeah,
no, they don't. I mean, I can only imagine what he was getting paid then. Probably, if he was lucky, probably 20 grand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the guys out here that work out here, that the only ones that get paid good are maybe ones in the bigger parts like Brentwood, Franklin area.
Yeah.
But everybody else, they're not getting paid a lot. Maybe if they're lucky, they're clearing 60.
There was a friend of mine who does podcasting as well. He talked a little bit about this. He said he worked for the county sheriffs outside of the city of Syracuse, and he was making $9,000. And I want to say this was in the mid 70s. And he went to work for the city of Syracuse, and he was making $18,000.
Yeah, I made $11,000 my last year in 1982. Yeah, 83.
But to Danny's point, the big city guys or municipalities, they tended to make a lot more money than these rural county sheriffs.
Yeah, that's right.
City police guys, right? So, and that's where the corruption sneaks in, and that's why.
They're trying to make up that buck, and you're right about that.
Yeah,
the corruption. Because I remember one time I was working Paramount. We had a ride along real quick. It was a guy from New York. He was a copper out there, and we're in Paramount. We're cruising around, and the fruit guy and the hot dog guy are in the corners doing their thing, and he tells me, my partner, he goes, "Hey, those guys over there, how much are you taxing those guys for?" I look at it. I go, I already know what he's talking. I go, well, we don't really have to do that here, man. We make, told him we make a good living here. He goes, oh man, back home, those guys be getting taxed,
Yeah, yeah, I know. When people found out what I was making over the years, particularly as an executive back east, when you go, you mix it up with other chiefs or whatnot, and they find out what you make, they're like, I went to a thing and there was a guy he was the chief of, or second in command of St. Louis PD, and he found out what I was making. And he was like, "What?"
Exactly.
And I think it was a captain at the time, so it was, the difference.
We're very lucky and very fortunate with what we made and what we get now, because like when I was working with the bureau there, those guys are 20-year out at 47.
Yeah.
And they only get 42%.
The new guys, you mean? The
new agents are only getting like 42, 47% of their, So when you tell them, hey, I'm getting you 90, 92, they're looking at you like, what do you mean?
Yeah, we were making good money, and we were in pensions in the golden age of pensions. So we were very fortunate. Yeah, although I have to pay a portion to that other person, that woman that will be named.
Well, you could go work you get a job with Inglewood PD. Those guys are getting paid buco bucks right now.
Right. Yeah, because they got the stadiums there. They got a good tax revenue, and but they struggled for a few years.
Oh yeah, they did for a lot of years, but now.
Yeah, now they're making bank. All right, guys, thanks for joining me here today on Morning Coffee with the Chief. We got a little bit of late start and a little bit of late over. You want to hang out for a quick debrief. Martine, we are at the end of our show. Gambit and Tom, thanks for sticking up with us all the way to the end, and enjoy the rest of your week, guys.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
Thank you.